Hello everyone. I want to show you how to sew the windows that you'll find on the houses in our book, Quilt A New Christmas. I'm looking specifically at the houses in Christmas in the Park, and it is this house that we're going to work on, one of these windows right here. To make it easier to show you how to do this, I've made a copy of the pattern of that house. We describe how to do this in the book for you to make your templates and your patterns. So this is the window right here. And you'll notice that it's numbered 2 and 3. The center of the window is reverse appliqued. It is not the number 2 shape sewn on top of the number 3 shape. It's the number 3 shape with the number 2 cut out of the center of it so that the depth is correct. That way the number 2 feels like the window glass that's set into the sashing around the window. So the way you do this is you make your templates. You don't actually make a template for 2. We have to number that space so that you know where it lays in relationship to number 3. But the number 3 template is the only thing you need to do this shape. And your number 3 template looks like this. To work with this, I take my sandboard. Let me set my template aside. And the fabric that I would use for the sashing, I place right side up on the sandpaper, on the sandboard. I would place this template right side up on the fabric, just like that. You want to place it so that it's on the diagonal grain of the fabric. And this is a shape that you're not going to cut out with its exact 3/16 inch seam allowances and then place it on the fabric to sew. That would be a little more difficult. We're going to use a cutaway applique technique on this, so you want to make sure that you put it on there so that you're going to have at least an extra 3/4 of an inch around this fabric when you're working. So I would trace around the outside of the template and the inside of the template, and I would cut it out and it would look like this. Finger press. Now you're going to sew the center area first. We're going to construct this window off the block. So I would not finger press the outer edges of this window yet, just the inside edges. You want to turn this so that the drawn line is turned toward the center of the window. You don't want to see any of that chalk here. So all of the chalk is turned to the inside, none of the chalk is visible on the sashing. When you get to the end of these lines, these corners, finger press beyond the end of that line into the window sashing itself. You'll get a prettier inner curve there, or I'm sorry, inner point if you do that. And I do that in both directions, so it's as if I have 2 crossed finger pressed lines there. And I would finger press all 4 of these edges. Make sure that you get every part of that line finger pressed under. Now let me set that aside for a moment. The fabric that I'm going to use for the inside of the window is this yellow print. I like to put yellow or light bright colors inside a window because it looks then like the window is lit, the house is lit from the inside. So I cut a square or a shape, a rectangle of this yellow print, and I took my window and pinned the finger pressed window sashing to the yellow fabric. You don't want to work on too small a piece of fabric. If I had cut this yellow fabric out little bitty and then tried to pin this to it, it's more difficult to sew in your hand if you've got little tiny scrunchy pieces of fabric. Granted, this could be a little bit more than I need, but it is going to be easier to hold on to having this large piece of fabric. Once you get this finger pressed and pinned in position on your inside, it's basically your number 2 window fabric, then you can carefully cut through the top fabric. And I say carefully because you only want to cut the top fabric, not the underneath fabric, until you can get your scissors in there. And then you're going to trim away the interior of this space, leaving a 3/16 inch seam allowance to the inside of the window sashing, to the inside edge. Cut carefully. Keep your seam allowances uniform. Be careful not to chew up those inner corners as you go through. You're going to cut that like that. Now I would thread my needle excuse me, with matching thread that matches the pink. Excuse me. And I would bring my needle up about here, in between these two inner points. I would use my needle or my toothpick to turn the seam allowance under, and then I would sew to the inner point. A little before you get there, you'll have to clip that so you can turn it. Turn the inner point, work your way around, do the other inner point, and so on until you're back to the beginning where you would knot your thread. You'll have a piece that looks like this, and that is sewn with the pins removed. I took them out as I went. Now to finish this, what you do is turn this piece over, and you can see where the stitching line is that tells you where the center of this applique piece is. I want to trim away the excess yellow fabric, leaving a 3/16 inch seam allowance. Now I'm being very careful not to cut the pink fabric that I have on the other side. And I don't want to cut this fabric too short. The scissors I'm using here are perfect for this. These are Karen K. Buckley's smaller applique scissors. They're about 4.5 inches long, and the scissor blades have a serration. It's like they have little teeth. They grab the fabric very well, allowing you to do a very accurate cut here. So trim this away. Then you can turn it over and trim away the excess fabric here, leaving you with a completed window unit to sew to the quilt just like that, all in one fell swoop. So I would go ahead and cut out all 4 sides, finger press this, and then use my overlay to attach it, or to put it in place on the block, and then I would applique it down. I wanted to show you too, that's the way you do the windows. Let me move this out of the way. That's also the way you do the doors in this block. So if you look at the door shapes, they're much the same, they just don't have a strip at the bottom. So here the template is sort of U-shaped. You don't actually have a template for the number 4 door. You would instead trace around your applique, or trace around this template onto the sashing fabric. You would finger press the door just to the inside all the way around. And you saw me do this with the window. I don't know that you need to see me finger press the whole thing. I would finger press each of these sides, inside edges of the door frame, and then I would place this on whatever fabric I wanted to use for the door. I chose this blue. I'm going to put this on here, and it can be on the diagonal or not. If you place the this shape, the sashing fabric that you've traced, if you place it on the diagonal grain of the door fabric, then the bottom edge of the door will be on the bias and easier to sew if you need to turn it under. Or you can place it on the straight of grain. I would pin this here and here and here, and sew the inside edges of the door to the blue fabric in this case. I would treat it just like the window. I would turn it under and trim away the excess blue fabric, then I would turn it right side up and trim away these shapes. Now you will need to complete the line here. So I guess it's true. In that case, to get this bottom line, it would be helpful to have the number 4 door template. You could also use your ruler and just run a line straight across there, because in this case, it is just a straight line across. And that's how you would do the doors, very similar to the way you do the windows. And that is how you get these shapes that are appliqued in place on this very cute quilt.